As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money in the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called the disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had and all she had to live on."
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I'm going to ask the young disciples to come join me up front, right up here on the front pew. Come on up, Kemuel. Come on up, Jordan. Arabil, come on up. Good to see you all today. Come have a seat. Welcome. Welcome. Okay. Amira, come on. Come on. I'm going to ask you to help me with something, Amira. Can you come here? Can you come here to me? Come here. Can you hold this for me? Okay. Actually, first, can you put your mask on? Let's do that. Okay. Let's make sure everybody has their mask on to be safe, 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 right? Okay. There you go. Okay. Now, can you hold this for me? And can you turn around and look at these other children? Turn around. Right here. Okay. Hold it down just a little bit. Okay. So I want you guys to make sure you know the story that Miss Carol just read for us. She read that story. It's from the Bible. And it was about a time when Jesus and his friends were out there in front of the church. And they used to have a plate like this, or a box, that was out on a table outside before they came into church. And people came by and they would, what do you think they would put in here? Money. They would put in money so that the church would have what the church needed to support the things they needed to buy, to make sure they had the lights, to make sure everything was working, okay? So there were these people. I want to show you like what kind of money they had. I'll get into my pocket here. There were some people who had a lot of money. And they were walking by and they were coming into the church. And so they had like, you know, a stack of money A lot. See, this is a lot of dollars, like this. Do I have a lot of money? Yeah. So they would walk up, and they would see the box or the basket, and they would walk up and they'd say, I think I'm just going to give one. Oh, thank you so much. I'm just going to give one, and that's good. You know, I'm going to keep the rest. Who are they going to keep the rest for? Themselves. They're going to keep the rest for themselves, put it back in their pocket, right? And then they're going to go into church and say, I did a great job. I put some money in the basket. Well, then there came a lady along coming up to church. She was coming. She did not have hardly any money. She was all by herself. She didn't have anybody to help her with her cooking and her getting her food. She just was all alone, and she didn't have very much money. So this was how much she had. Is that a lot of money? No. She had 2 coins. That's all she had. And she walked up, and she saw the basket, and she put them both in. And then she went on into church, and she said to herself, God, I hope that you will bless the money I was able to give. Okay, I will hold that again. Thank you so much for carrying that. You did a great job. Thank you so much. So, I want to I want to tell you then what happened. So Jesus saw what they were doing, and he said, she really gave more because she gave from her heart everything she had, right? And the people with all of this, they only threw one in there. They said, I'm just going to do a little bit. But she was very giving from what she had. And Jesus said, thumbs up to her. Can you give me a thumbs up? Thumbs up to her for what she did, because she gave from her heart and gave from what she could. She gave everything she could. Okay, so that's an important thing that we try to remember, is that we want to be people who can give from our heart and give what we can, okay? And not just a little tiny bit off the top if we have a lot, just throw it in, but give from our heart. So, okay, thank you guys for joining me. You can go back and sit down. So I invite you to start off this morning with me by being very clear about something. All things come from God. The amazing creation that we are a part of is made by God. God is sovereign over all, which basically means God is the source and God is in control. So some people wonder if maybe it's more appropriate to talk about how we make our decisions as to which of God's gifts we're planning to keep for ourselves, instead of thinking which of God's gifts are we giving back to God because they came from God in the first place. We should think more about which of those gifts do we need to keep for ourselves, because the rest already belongs to God. I'm sure you have heard before this old chant that was composed by Beethoven years and years ago. It's not in our hymn book, but it's used by many churches at the time of the offering. And I'll bet you've heard it. It goes like this: all things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee. All things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee. God gives it, and we give it back. Some of it, anyway. Like those rich people at the temple, we hold on to the parts that we think we need. We hold on to the parts we know we don't need, but we want. We are okay to give back from the stuff we're not invested in, the extra, the leftovers, forgetting that it all really belongs to God. That is not the mindset that Jesus praises. It's too common among human beings. Instead, he praises what the woman did, which is not the common behavior. That's probably the first hurdle to understand giving to the ministry of the church. When we start to think about our time, our gifts, and our financial resources as God-given resources that we're expected to manage, we begin to look at these resources through a different lens. For a long time, I have known as a pastor that stewardship is not a short season in November when church members are reminded of the ministry of their particular church, both within this building and outside the building. Stewardship is really more of a lifestyle than a season. It's more of a decision-making framework than a budget in an Excel spreadsheet approved by the session. A steward is one who cares for the whole household. That was the task of the steward. That means the people, that means the buildings, that means the work that goes on in that household. Stewardship implies being interconnected then among a household. The Greek word for steward is oikos, and it's the base of several words that we use commonly in English, like ecumenical, ecology, economy. If you think about it, each one of those words really points to interconnectedness. Whether it's among worshiping communities, ecumenical, or whether it's the intricate web of life where all creatures are dependent on other creatures, ecology, or whether it's the buyers and the sellers and the producers and the consumers who make up an economy. We are the stewards or the managers of that which God has entrusted us in the various households that we operate in, whether it's our nuclear family or our extended family or our church or our community or the entire globe. With the comparison of the poor widow and the rich people in the back of our minds, I'd like to offer you 7 reasons to be a faithful steward at Hunting Ridge. And you might, if you've got a pen or a pencil, you might want to make a list of these 7 and see what you think. Basically, why should you be a giver to the ministry of this congregation? When I say giver, I mean a giver of any resource that you have. If you don't have the resource, you can't give it, correct? Maybe there are some resources, though, that you didn't realize that you had. Your resources include, but it's not limited to, you may think of other resources that you have. Your time, your energy, your passions, your income, your skills and talents, your hands, your mouth, your feet, your heart, your mind. Now, you can give out of those resources for many reasons. I hope you don't give because you feel guilty if you don't. I hope you don't give out of some sense of duty. You can give for many reasons. I'm going to list 7. You might identify with 1 or 2 of them. You might be challenged by one of them. You might cross some off your list and say, that's not why I give. Listen, number one, you can give in joyful response to God's goodness and generosity. As a response to what God has given you. Think about the way God cared for, guided, and loved God's people throughout the scriptures as you read. Think about the amazing earth we inhabit that we've been given to care for. Think about your own family or friends that you've been given to love and be loved by. Listen to these words from the psalmist in Psalm 85. Lord, you've been kind to your land. You've changed Jacob's or Israel's circumstance for the better. You've forgiven your people's wrongdoing. You've covered all their sins. In gratitude to God for God's goodness and generosity toward you, you give as a response to that. So that's one reason to give. A second reason is you can give as a way to obey God's commands. If you love me, you will keep my commandments, Jesus said to his disciples. In various places throughout the Old Testament, we find commandments regarding what should be given to God. Expectations for tithing to the work of the temple, giving 10% of one's resources. We're familiar with that thinking of tithing as 10% of our income. In the book of Leviticus, the income was crops and animals. Listen to the instruction from God through Moses. All 10th part gifts or tithes from the land, whether seed or from the ground or fruit from the trees, and all 10th part gifts from a herd or a flock will be holy to the Lord. Well, what if we would set a goal for ourselves of giving 10% of our time? Is that another way, perhaps, to tithe, to obey God's command? So what would that look like for you? I did a little bit of math and guessed maybe that in a given day during the week we might have 16 waking hours, just guessing, totaling 112 hours each week that we can decide how to use. Now, obviously, you have to eat. You have to take care of hygiene things. But we have 112 of those hours to decide how to use. So what I figured is if we wanted to tithe those hours, those waking hours, it'd be like 11 hours and 13 minutes each week to be dedicated to God. Maybe it's preparing for and attending worship. Maybe it's prayers or devotions at home by yourself or with your family. Maybe it's serving others in some way. Maybe it's just being able to recognize and appreciate God's gifts in nature or God's gift in your family. You can be a giver by following God's command to give your resources of whatever kind. Number 3, third reason to give. You can look at your gifts of time and talent and financial resources as holy gifts. Gifts of love that become for you a part of stewardship lifestyle, not a one-time commitment, but a lifestyle. You give gifts all the time, don't you, to people around you? You give the gift of a listening ear sometimes. You give tangible gifts to someone. You give someone a ride somewhere. That's truly a gift. Sometimes you give something you make or something you purchase. Sometimes you take the trash out unexpectedly when you weren't expected to. That's a gift. You can think of lots of other gifts that might be small, but they're gifts of love for the people you love and the people you care for. And you can give those gifts anytime, all year long, right? Giving gifts from the resources we have at our disposal can be an ongoing practice throughout the year, anytime. You're giving by living a life full of gifts of love, and they become holy gifts when you're giving them to God. Fourth reason to give. You can give as an action that illustrates our covenant of love with Jesus Christ. Last week, we explored the story of Ruth in the Old Testament, that story of covenant between Ruth and Naomi and between Boaz and Ruth. Covenants often come with a sign or a symbol we talked about last week. So perhaps giving of your time, your talents, and your financial resources can be like a visible sign for you of your covenant with Christ, who lived, died, and was resurrected for you and for me. You can be a giver because of the commitment you've made, because of the relationship you've built with Jesus Christ. Number 5, you can give because we're a connectional church, because you know that we are all in this together. Presbyterians really stress the nature of our connectional church family. Not only right here in Hunting Ridge, but with other churches in our presbytery, we are connected. We also are connected to Presbyterians all across the country. We're connected to one another. For example, we received this week an invitation to participate in the ordination and installation of a new pastor at our neighboring church on the other side of the park, Dickey Memorial Presbyterian. We got invited because we're connected. We count on one another as Presbyterians. We draw strength from one another. You know that proverb. I'm sure you've heard it before. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I heard Senator Cory Booker use that proverb at the reparations hearing on Capitol Hill. That is our homework to watch for the next Be More Humans event next Monday. Listening to his words about how we are all in this together. We're connected to one another. When churches close in our presbytery and the buildings are sold, a portion of the income goes into what's called now the Enduring Witness Fund. A witness to Christ that is enduring and continues on. And that fund is available to congregations who have a large capital expenditure that they can't cover, or to congregations who are trying to start some new initiative in their neighborhood. Because, you see, other Presbyterians in another place around our presbytery lived as givers, we were able this week to receive a grant that will pay more than half of the cost of our sewage pipe repair here in this old building. A repair that is coming soon, we hope. Our church, you see, sees God at work not just in individual people, definitely in individuals, but as we live and serve as a community. Now, we all know that the amount of your gifts varies from person to person. You know, one person's retired, and she can give all kinds of time. Another person's a gifted musician, and he can give more music than those of us who are not. One person maybe receives an inheritance or a settlement of some sort and is able to give a large amount of money. But none of them, none of us can do it all. We're healthier and we're stronger as a church when we share the load, when we don't depend just on one person's time or one person's gifts or one person's money. When all of our offerings of time and gifts and money are combined, that's a way to be a giver. Number 6, you can give because you believe that your giving makes changes in somebody's life. That God works through Hunting Ridge in this community in some way. You are helping to pay the expense of hiring a plumber who's starting his own business to replace that sewage pipe. You're supplying food that puts Thanksgiving dinner on the table for 50 families in Rosemont. You're providing Hunting Ridge a bit of well-cared green space right out here in a busy city with lots of cement. How many different ways could you think of where lives are changing because you give? Lives are changing because we are here in this place. Are you giving and sharing and managing your resources in such a way that you are changing lives? You might not think of it that way, but you may be. Maybe you don't know it. We change lives really any way, through any interaction with other people. I love this quote from a Presbyterian singer-songwriter. He's an author. He is a peace activist. His name is David Lamotte. He says, "You are changing the world whether you like it or not. So what changes will you make?" You see, you can be a giver because you are excited about what this congregation is doing to change lives in this world. And finally, number 7, you can give so that you can use your God-given gifts. Each of us is called to discover and use our own abilities. When we have the gift of hospitality, but we never take a turn in helping to host an event at the church or the snacks after worship, once we're able to perhaps do that again, then we're not being good stewards of that gift of hospitality that we have. When we're willing to try being the lay reader, even though we're super afraid of speaking in front of other people, we're exploring then the possibility of developing a gift. We bless others by serving, by volunteering, by witnessing, by inviting. Remember that we are stewards or managers of all gifts and resources that we have at our disposal. Paul writes to the Christians in Corinth in his first letter, "What is expected of a manager is that he or she prove to be faithful." That's the best compliment we could give to one another, and that's the best compliment we could get from God. You are a faithful steward of your time, your money, and your gifts. So my brothers and sisters, there's lots of reasons to give. You may add more to my list of 7. As you look this week for a letter in your mailbox from your church, I ask that you take time to ponder the ways that you can be a giver of your time, your money, and your gifts in this particular congregation at this particular time. Thanks be to God that we can be givers. Amen.